Good afternoon. I'm Scott Tucker here with Mike Wallace and Steve Wieman to talk about resumes during the military retirement process. So it's Halloween, and what I thought I'd dress up a little bit as a joke to talk about getting attention, because that's kind of what the resume is for, right? Is to help you stand out at some part during the process. Ironically, when you're getting on things like LinkedIn, you can do other things to grab attention, but it was
hopefully, like Steve said, you're getting attention in a good way, right? Not attention for the other.
So I never get to pull this out, but it was the scariest thing I could figure out what to wear on Halloween. So just thought we'd make a little joke there. But guys, no, I just really appreciate Steve, you joining us to discuss this topic in more detail, because I think especially now that there's the Chat GPT and everybody thinks, oh, there's always a formula or a template you can follow. And obviously there's that to an extent, but it really is finesse from what I've heard from talking with you over the years. And I've been mostly self-employed since I got out of the military. So I just haven't properly gone through. I have to do different versions of resumes. Let's put it that way. That's what all this websites and book writing is. That's just different types of resumes. But so I'm always curious, what, people that work with us could do to increase their income. That's the whole point, right? To get a better job or a better fit for a better lifestyle, right? So it's all got to start, putting it on paper a little bit. And so I know that's what the resume is about, but I'm going to, take this jacket off and pass it over to you guys. And
sorry, that's me. I got it.
If you hit your mute. No.
Yeah.
But Steve, why don't you introduce Steve a little bit, Mike? And
I will. But before we get into that, or maybe I can just do it real quick right now. But I just want to make sure we come back to you. I just kind of, I know you got a lot going on in the U.S. vet world, right? And always interested in getting an update on that. But absolutely happy to have Steve joining us here today. For many of our Blue Water members, they know Steve. We've worked so hard about reeling him in, reeling him in closer in alignment with what we're trying to do here at Blue Water. And so if he were standing up, you could see that he's tall enough to ride the ride, both in expertise and stature, right? And he would go right off the top of the screen as you're looking at it there. But I've known Steve for a number of years, right, Steve? We go back even at our time in active duty. And as he stepped into his own career progression, right, Steve pursued Amazon, right? While I was at Amazon, and we spent some time kind of discussing that pursuit as well. He landed at a directorship there, was with the company for a number of years. As a follow-on there, pursued another directorship at a company called Tegra Global, and it's a company that's locally here in where were they actually headquartered, Steve? Was it Portsmouth or was it actually in Norfolk?
Princess Anne Road in Norfolk. Yeah, okay. Right down to them.
And was there for a short while. He's got great insights and some interesting challenges he worked through there. Spent a little time with SAIC and the Leidos kind of org, larger org there. And then he's currently with Booz Allen, right? Working as a senior leader there on the Naval Aviation Enterprise effort. So a wealth of experience and insight, and I'm happy to be partnered with Steve in this. He doesn't realize it, but I tell him probably not often enough that I absolutely rely on him more than he knows, right? And together we're driving change in and amongst with our other career progression consultants, who all of them can't be here. I think we're up to now 6 or 7, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, I'll just throw them out here real quick. Brian Herdlick's a big, staunch supporter and makes large contributions. Todd Flannery as well. Dave Wadelick is up in Richmond with Feed More, right? That nonprofit up there. He's coming online. We've got down south in Pensacola, Fred Smith, right, has helped us with a number of our Pensacola engagements down there. San Diego efforts, Jim Webb, he's remains a staunch supporter out there. I know he wants to get in closer with us, and so we're going to look for opportunity to continue to bring him in. John Malfitano as well. And then in and amongst the leadership team, right, with Scott McDonald and Joe Dalton, right, we're driving change. Did I forget anybody there, Steve? I mean, I know I kind of rattled through that
I think
list.
you got everybody. Rick Dijksterhouse as well on the RBLP side. Yeah,
Cuban Phillips is
partners.
bringing on some RBLP efforts, and we're really excited about that. So, but a large part of that, Scott, is resume, and we hear a lot of things, see a lot of things, probably is a better way to say it, and we try to give some keen insights to our members when and where we can. So that's a quick introduction, but let me segue back to you, Scott. What's going on with US Vet Wealth? What do you and Jen got cooking lately here?
Just this. Basically, this I call it War Chest Academy Live. So, what we call our solution is, having a war chest, and that's essentially the idea to help the military retiree, better answer the decisions on survivor benefit plan, thrift savings plan, VGLI. At some point, there's an insurance related question in there, but instead of focusing on just when am I going to die? Like, we know that's going to happen, but it's probably not going to be soon.
Eventually, right? Death and taxes; those are the two certainties in life, right?
So what we're doing just a little bit differently than everybody else. Let's just put it that way. Again, nothing wrong with standard ways. It's just if you are healthier than the average American, which you are as a military retiree, most likely, and you're making more money than the average American, and if you're working with Blue Water Advisors, pretty good chance that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Then, maybe some of those benefits aren't quite as beneficial to you because they're not going to be as meaningful as what they're set up for. They're set up for the masses, all the veterans. So, putting together this program, obviously, we work with a lot of retirees over the years and more specifically the last few years on this particular strategy. And so now we're actually rolling it out. We got programs. Obviously, we had the book out there for a while, but we found that most people like watching a few hours of our videos, honestly, before they say, okay, hey, now I understand how this would work for me. Let's kind of see the numbers. So that's how we work. That way everybody can just kind of use this when we can be useful for them wherever they are in their process. Pre-military retirement, during the process, years down the road, there might be a benefits or, insurance, wealth related, I call it wealth insurance question to come up. And, one of the best ways to do that is with a war chest. And so that's what we got rolling out. Got new series of videos coming on our website. So excited to do that. And so thanks for asking.
It's great. And Scott, you'll see next week. In fact, Steve and I just received an interesting article from Brian Herdlick, who forwarded. It was an interesting discussion and an interesting look at. And I'll use your word, the war chest, right? And the gist of the article was, I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet or not, Steve, but the gist of the article was, having, and I'll call it a rainy day fund or a war chest, but not for those obvious reasons, but for extended reasons, like buying yourself the ability to say no to a job that maybe you're not interested in, right? Okay. Not feeling pressured.
The ability to walk away.
The ability to walk away. Yeah. And that's a better way to say it. And it was just a really interesting read. And you'll see it, Scott, where I've got it loaded up in the buffer queue, and it'll go out, I think, next Wednesday. But and for the viewers out there, like, we look at a ton of articles that are out there. There's a lot that I personally look at. I know Brian is into this as well, too, Steve as well. And there's a lot that just end up on the cutting room floor. But I thought this was an interesting kind of way to look at it, right? It's like, hey, it's just not money just to kind of have for a rainy day. This is decision-making authority, right? I can say no. I can walk away or not based on, this war chest, your words, Scott. And I just thought it was an interesting approach on it. So when it comes out, you take a look at it and let me know what you think. But
no, absolutely. Well, actually, that's a good caveat. Over to Steve. I want to ask you, as Mike was introducing you, it sounds like you've had a number of good opportunities, not just being able to be sort of independent working with Mike, as well, but you've had probably different versions of resumes and different opportunities to say, hey, I feel comfortable walking away. So whether or not your version of a war chest, had something to do with it, that can be another topic. But let's get into the resumes. How'd you go through that process? And
yeah, well, thanks, Scott and Mike, for kind of having me on today. I love the partnership that you guys have, and it's really gone back to the infancy of both companies, right? Blue Water and Veteran Wealth, and so it's been kind of great to see this mature. So, Scott, really to answer your question, my first resume was written when I was 28 and a half years into the Navy. So I won't say the number that I was in age-wise, but it was not your typical high school or college graduate resume, right? And the thing that we do in the military is we focus on the we, right? My battalion or our battalion and my ship, and we focus on unit level accomplishments more than we focus on individual value that we provided. And that's just institutional to the military, right? We win as a team. And the transition happens when you're getting ready to provide value or articulate value to the company that you want to join or to the organization that you want to join. And we're just not good at it, right? We just haven't had that developmental process to get us to be comfortable in that environment. So, my transition experience was it was challenging, not having had Blue Water advisors, on my side to plug into Mike or any of the resources he has. It was a lot of stumbling, and I thought I got it right, and then I got feedback that it wasn't right. And so, I landed at several different companies. Not that any of them were, I wouldn't change a thing, but I felt like I had some blinders on looking back, looking in the rearview mirror. I would have done things a little differently. And so I think what we try to, espouse at Blue Water is, how do you on a resume, it matters what type of resume, it matters the quality of the resume. The words that you use have to be about you and the value that you provide to someone who is seeking solutions. And so that's really the key theme that we provide in our resume discussion in our cohorts. It's really about turning into the inner you and what you want to provide and what you can provide from a skill set and your experiences and your credentials. So, that's really kind of in a nutshell what we try to do. And institutionally, we're just not good at that in the military. Yeah. And so we need help doing that. And that's why I think Mike's program and the Blue Water, concepts and methods really work, because we have people who have done this before and have struggled and not succeeded, and our progression consultants really can assist in that process.
Scott, we've got, if you the introductions that I ran through the Rolodex of our career progression consultants, right? Just top shelf individuals across the board, but it does make a difference if individuals have had to assess or find talent through reviewing resumes. You understand what I'm saying? It's like
if they were hiring managers themselves in some capacity.
Yeah, if you're a hiring manager and you're sitting here and you're trying to make a connection. I wrote a position description and now I'm reading somebody's resume. Right. And here's a stack of 200 of them that I've got, maybe an hour and a half to get through to come up with top 5 picks. Right.
As a senior leader, when you're on active duty, are you not hiring sometimes civilians where you have to look through resumes? Are they giving you that kind of training?
Yeah, no, I don't think you get trained of it. But Steve, right? You may be hiring maybe a contractor, or the ones that I were involved were USA Jobs type kind of related. And
so you're talking about guys with experience out in the civilian world, like Steve, who can say, "Oh, now I see it from the other side," and that's the unique value you're bringing.
Like Steve at Booz Allen will periodically, I'm sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Steve, but be a part of a hiring action. Maybe he's going to interview somebody, or maybe he's going to look at a resume and say, "Hey, this person's a good fit." The point that I want to try to make is when you come to us, you get individuals that have done that. But that's the credibility when I look at your resume and I go, "Hey, let's talk about a different way to do this. And here's how I want you to do it. And this is why I want you to do it this way." Because I already know the person that's going to look at this and what's going to go through their mental calculus, right? Their gymnastics as they look at this and try to assess a good fit. Does that make sense? I mean, that's the credibility you bring to the table, and we owe that to our members. And we work hard to preserve that, right? And Steve, you maybe put a smile on your face here, but we tell our members often, we have lots of one-liners when it comes to resumes and lots of quippy responses, but the takeaway is there is value in listening to the words. In other words, we go, hey, you all are, due an apology. And they're going, what are you talking about? And he goes, yeah, we apologize because you're going to put a lot of work into your resume. And the fact of the matter is it's only got a lifespan of about 20 or 30 seconds, maybe at the most, right? And they go, what? And I go, look, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. You have to have a good one. It has to be flawless. It has to, it's your ticket to the dance. It's got to get you to the door. It has to survive first contact, and it's got to drive you to the keep pile. And then after that, people want to talk to you. They're not going back to your right. And that's really the fact of the matter is. And so we go, we're sorry. You're going to put weeks into this product, but it's just not going to have a lifespan. And I think sometimes they kind of look at us like, what, are you serious? And we're like, yeah, it's legit. Right. I mean,
I was going to say another point, Mike, is, when we talk to folks and they're coming up on their transition window, 9 months, year, whatever it is, and you ask them what their timeline is and, what do you want to do? And, some of the words are, well, yeah, I really got to get a resume together. Right.
Yes.
And
yes.
we put the brakes on that
yes.
thinking because that is an important part, but, it's probably 4th or 5th or 6th on the list, maybe. Especially a year out, right?
Yeah.
If you're a year out, 9 months out, resume, we could whip one up in the next 2 to 3 hours and be probably an 80% solution, right? Based on some evaluations and fit reps and stuff.
Yep.
But the most important part is, does it get you to where you want to go? We could take you anywhere. We can help you get anywhere. But is it where you want to go, where the best fit is, where the suitable compensation is, and the location that you want? That's the process of strategizing and figuring out your fit and your mission and vision. That's where the resume puts a fine point on all those discussions. That where the rubber meets the road on the resume. But the thinking part we overlook, and the strategizing part we overlook. We as military officers, we want to do and succeed and fix. Mm-hmm. But the thinking part is the hard part here. The words on the paper, that's something that we can do very quickly. The hard part is everything before that.
No, you're absolutely right. And, some of the conversations we have with our members, Steve does a great job on the resume segment, right? And that's also one that I enjoy giving as well, too, because I think it's very near and dear to us, right? And you have absolutely no difficulty in delivering the message out there, right? Because it really is filled full of so many short one-liners that are so impactful. You got to listen to the message, right? Mm-hmm. Another one is that, just to reinforce the point that Steve was making, right? Your resume, there's nothing wrong with the reverse chronological, which is probably typically, I think you'd agree, that's probably the first resume that most people try to put together. Here's who I am in a rear view mirror. Here's all the things I did in a rear view mirror, right? It's a historical document, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good writing exercise, but foot stomper. And for the audience out there listening, we do not espouse that to be the document that you utilize when you're targeting your success, right? Whatever it is you're targeting, whatever it is you're pursuing, you've got to target that effort, right? You have to pull up the position description, which people tell us, and Steve was exactly right. Your resume that you're going to use, that's really, not even in the top 5, right? It's maybe 4, 5, or 6 on the list. I mean, I'm going to tell you that we can't give you the feedback that you want on your resume until I know what job you're applying to. Mm-hmm. And the whole resume discussion, important as it is, really reinforces the importance of networking. It's networking that's really going to get you the leg up, but it will never absolve you of the need of having a very well-written, targeted resume, right? I mean, you have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
let me ask Steve.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier that, hey, you thought when you put your first resume out there that you had it dialed in, and then you found out that it wasn't the case? Can you dive into that a little bit and sure.
Yeah, well, some of the basic transition assistance that we had was educational, right? And never having gone through that drill before, I didn't really think about what my strategy or my target was, right? So it was just a regurgitation of everything that I had on my Navy paperwork, right? Just successful accomplishments, some of the responsibilities that I had in my last 2 or 3 tours, which was great. But again, there was no vector to it. There was a lot of thrust on there, but not a lot of vector, right? Which direction was it taking me? I didn't know. And so that's why we talk so much, and the whole first half of the day, in the Blue Water cohort is really about figuring out what it is that I want to do, what I need to do, what environment, what battle space am I entering today? Yeah. And the resume is really just the ticket, right? It's the getting to the amusement ride. That's the important part. The resume is the ticket. These conversations, the resume is not going to get you a job, right? Mike mentioned that already. It's the networking, it's the connections. You could put a resume out, 200 to 300 applications, throw your resume on there. You think it looks fantastic, but is it targeted in the right location? Does it have the connections backing it up to take it, past the hiring, the friction of the hiring process, right? Does it get into a hiring manager's hands?
What is it that you say? You say pray and spray, or what is spray and pray? What does it say again?
Spray and pray. You spray applications out there, you hit send on your job application, and then you pray that some human reads it, right? And the chances are a human's not going to read it.
Yeah, we've had members that have come in and said, this is going to be hard. I've applied to hundreds of jobs. I've got my resume out on all kinds of job boards. Nobody's calling me. I'm not even getting a response. And we kind of go, well, that doesn't really, that's not surprising to us, right? I mean, it's an untargeted. There are, things like applicant tracking systems that do a lot of this weeding out. And if you're approaching this with no supporting network, it's not surprising, right? I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen. There's probably a listener out there that has been the recipient of a niche win, and I love hearing these stories about, oh, that's not true. I put my application into IBM and it was only there for 3 days. They called me up, they interviewed me once, and they hired me. Like, I love stories like that. It does happen. But in the conversation, right, we quickly get to the 98% of the rest of the world, right? I mean, that's not going to happen to them, right? I mean, it's just not going to happen. So,
yeah, Mike, you kind of mentioned the technology piece of this. There's a lot of tools out there, right? ChatGPT and there's some generative AI things that can maybe help you with your resume. We think those things are potentially helpful, additive, and something that you can leverage. But there's also resume writing services out there, professionals who do this for a living, right?
That's a good one. Steve, what do you think about that? Tell me, what do you think about resume writing services?
Yeah, I think there's value in there, Mike. But at the end of the day, if I were to advise somebody, I would say it's worth going through the drill of figuring out what you're good at, what you want to do, where to target it. And at the the resume writer is going to ask you for all of your information anyway, right? And you're going to provide it to them, and you're going to help translate the military speak to a resume writer who's not familiar with the military speak, right? And then so you kind of step through the steps that they're going to have to take anyway. Yeah. So why don't we, focus on, communicating that on paper in your own words, right? In your own values. So now that's not to say that we don't like resume writers. We do. We're industry partners with them, and that's certainly something that that's something to consider. But there is a lifespan on each resume, and when you go to a professional, what are the agreements? And Scott mentioned we're going to have a lot of versions of this potentially. Potentially dozens. Absolutely. And when you go back to that writer, hey, does it, what's the additional charge? What's the terms of that transaction there? So,
and we've heard a lot about charges, right? I mean, it's not, Scott, you'd be surprised. It's not as inexpensive as what you might think.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, the justification is higher salary. Like, is it gonna help you get a job that you wouldn't otherwise got? I mean, I think what makes sense from my perspective, hearing your thoughts, is, when you really, I know I want this job, like, get all the resources you can. Otherwise, why not learn the skill set? Because, hey, there's another value add you bring to the company.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to dissect,
Mm-hmm.
Resume. Steve,
yeah, I was just going to say, we talk about the resume writers. We love resume writers. If I was going to apply for a job today, I'd think long and hard about securing a resume writer. Not because I've changed drastically in what I would pursue now than when I went through my own career progression, but because we're much more knowledgeable in the formats and the types of resumes, and we're more adept at knowing what good looks like. I don't know. That's the way I look at it, Steve. What do you think? I mean, I would feel better going back to somebody and go, hey, this is not what I asked for. I need you to do this. Right.
Yeah, I totally concur, Mike. There's knowledge, there's power in knowledge, right? And having that experience, and you and I, and Scott, if you've been in business long enough, you've read hundreds of resumes, right? Yeah. And immediately whether one is speaking to you or not. Yes. The idea of a resume is to get the reader to continue to read the whole thing, right? You capture their attention in a summary statement. Hey, I am seeking this. I have great experience doing this. The alignment starts to build, right from the first few sentences, yeah. and then you read down, and then the reverse chronological format, it starts bearing fruit, right? You have a tour where you had certain responsibilities, and these are the accomplishments. And Mike, you hear me talk during the cohort. I like, the star format, bulletized, in a certain position, you had a certain task, and then you had an action and a result. So that kind of walks you through, sort of like aligns with the interview process a little bit. I know at a glance, I haven't met you before, but you just walked me through a thing, an accomplishment, and a situation, and I'm continuing to read, right? Absolutely. And it becomes more and more interesting. So the 8 to 10 seconds becomes a 40 to 50 second, and then that goes in the keep pile, and then the other less interesting ones, because they don't speak to me, they go in the do not keep pile, and that's kind of the process I use when I review resumes, and I see someone who may have tremendous experience and probably is the right person. I don't spend a lot of time on their resume, unfortunately, because I don't have the time to do it. I'm a busy person, right? We're all hiring managers. This is a collateral position, collateral job on top of our regular JOBs.
That is a great point. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that, in the last couple of cohorts we have, and we probably need to throw that out in a bullet on one of the slides, because that's a great call out, Steve. I mean, people need to realize that you've got a full-time job. Mm-hmm. You've got a full-time something else that you're doing. Interviewing and hiring, either for your team or a peer team or whatever it happens to be, you're taking that time out of hide, so to say. That's a collateral duty, man. You're, and it's always, I shouldn't say always. My experience has been, it's time constrained. We got to hurry up and do this, right? And you're always having to juggle this in and around your own, schedule. Yep. And I think that's something that, people that are seeking their next success, it just helps them with the mindset, right? Just recognize the people that you're engaging there. This is a collateral effort for them. And it does take a lot of time away as they're diving into this process.
Yeah. So it sounds like the resume, really, it's to make their job easier. If you can write it to make it easier for them. And so that gets to the question I want to ask Steve about translating the skills. I know, you see this on LinkedIn all the time. Do you call yourself a vice president because that's what you sort of did in the military?
Classic.
Or do you just kind of repost your resume right on LinkedIn and just make someone click further? It's like, how do we, because I know that even Google, tried to make it easy for, I think that was meant for, younger people to transition out. How do you translate your job description? But how do you guys tackle that problem of making the civilians understand? Because from my perspective, I would think, hey, they kind of have an idea. What is really needed to be translated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tackle that one. And Mike, it's a good point. It's a point of, I guess, maybe some confusion and some misunderstanding out there. The bottom line is there is no job comparison to what you did in the military unless you're seeking a defense, type of construct, right? But if you're going from a senior military officer to a finance position, right, or to emergency management or consulting, perhaps, in industry somewhere, there really is no translation. So don't work at it so hard that you have to make it, that you have to worry about the words. Put the position that you had, put your responsibilities down there, worry about the translation piece afterwards. And again, if someone is seeking a senior officer or junior officer, whatever the niche may be, they're going to have enough knowledge. The recruiting team's going to have enough knowledge to do some of that bridging for you. So when we do see, CEO equivalent or COO equivalent, chief finance officer equivalent, I think it's being a little disingenuous to the people who are CEOs and who are COOs who have earned that title and that responsibility. We wouldn't, in reverse, if a finance officer or CEO of a company was joining our military organization, we would not appreciate to say, hey, I'm a carrier skipper equivalent, right? That does not translate, right? And so I would just say, be careful with that. I'd say that is not going to get you over the hump, and really the networking piece is going to help bridge any questions they may have, and you just want to initiate a conversation so that you can explain your talents and your value to their organization and how you meet their needs, whether it's through a position description or a strategic hire. This is the guy I want. I don't understand exactly what he did, but I'm going to have a conversation with him because it all sounds good to me from his resume and from the references that I've gotten through his networking contacts.
Absolutely. I agree. That's well said, Stephen. It's always spot on. The other thing I would throw in there too, Scott, is, we talk a lot to members. I want them, and just hang with me on the language here. We want them to write in math, right? I mean, Steve already alluded to, just like you would answer an interview question verbally in a STAR format. Well, the milestone achievements that you did while you were at your various different commands in the military, write it in that STAR format too. But I want you to get really adept at writing math. And what I mean by that is, we've all heard fluff language. I'm sure you saw it in the Army. We saw it in the Navy. Delivered never before seen levels of efficiency, right? This is one that we saw, I don't know, some time ago, but I keep bringing this up as an example. Like, what does that mean, right? I mean, like, delivered never before seen levels of efficiency, right? It doesn't have any math. The one language that all companies, industries across the board speak is math. Try writing it this way. Maybe it was led in such a manner that you increased retention by 15% year over year for a full-time equivalent headcount savings of $12.8 million over 6 quarters that allowed reallocation of funds to operational necessity, right? I mean, I don't care what industry or company you're with, man, you understand the scope and scale of that mathematical statement instead of just going, well, you deliver never before seen levels of efficiency, right? I mean, we've got to get away from that. And Steve and I spend a lot of time talking to members going, hey, and truth in advertising, right? These are hard to capture. Agreed, Steve? I mean, it's hard to capture this mathematical language, but if you do it one time and do it well, it's never throwaway work. This is applicable to so many pursuits for you out there. So, don't pass on it, right? Be hard on yourself and tease out the mathematical impact that you had there. That really is powerful, right? Speaking in that type of language and making sure that it ends up on your resume with the focus, not just being the situation, task, action, result that you took, but the focus is on the result, right? And the mathematical language. Thoughts on that? Did I miss anything on that, Steve?
No, you're spot on. Yeah, it's again, I kind of go back to what I said at the beginning. We thought in the we, and then now we're talking about the I, and that's a change to people. And then we can walk them down the path. Well, a ship achieved a certain accomplishment. Like, well, what did you do about it, Mike? Well, I led a big department. Well, what did that mean? You led a department. Like, what does that mean, right? So then you get down to the brass taxes. Well, you had 1,100 people under your charge, and you did many different things. What are the things organizationally that you brought to the table, that you orchestrated, that you improved? Right. And bringing a number to the table, you're right. That gets anyone's attention because as an industry professional, I'm thinking about numbers. My balance sheet runs my day, right? How healthy that is makes me happy or sad. But that's what the real focus is in industry. It's that balance sheet, and what are you doing to help improve the condition of that?
Hey, can I mention one pet peeve of mine on resumes? And I think Steve probably already knows what I'm going to throw out here. But Scott, we talk members through several different formats, whether it's just a reverse chronological, a combination, a functional, or a targeted. And every time this lesson comes up, man, I just see this functional formatted resume and I just lose my ever-loving mind, right? And I hate it. But you said something, Scott, earlier. You said the efforts you're doing on a resume should make it easier for the hiring manager or the person to assess talent on you, right? Did you remember you made that comment? And you're absolutely right. It should. So, Steve, why don't you, just talk me through, this functional formatted resume. And I think if you're listening out there and most of our members, they are drawn to the functional formatted resume. And I think, although I need to confirm this, but I think a lot of legacy institutionalized programs that are out there, when you look up the definition of a functional resume, it says, this is the format you should use for individuals in career transition. I mean, that's kind of the definition of a functional format. Mm-hmm. And just listen, everybody who's watching this, that does not include you. I mean, do not buy into the functional format. The functional format is dying. We post on it about once a quarter. And the reason is just not because we hate the functional format, is because you can absolutely hide information in this. And individuals that are stepping into their career progression with 15, 20, 25, 30 years of experience, you have no shortage of professional expertise and experience to bring to the table. You have no shortage of mathematical results to put into a targeted resume. There is no shortage of that type of information. You don't need to go and a functional and pursue a functional format. And to your point, Scott, if you're a hiring manager and you're looking at a functionally formatted resume, and again, just the listeners, just hang with me here. We don't have an image to share with you, but that's at the top of your resume where you're putting those functional areas of expertise. And then on the back end of the resume, then you're sharing with the reader what commands you were at, right? And so think about it. You're looking at this, and I now have to make an assessment. Well, Scott Tucker did these things, but where were you, Scott, when you did these things? What command were you at when you did these things? How long ago did you do these things? Maybe you're telling me that you did this skill set, but maybe you did it 20 years ago for all I know. I don't know. I'm flipping back and forth between pages trying to figure this out. I'm drawing diagonal lines and horizontal lines. And I'm trying to take notes all over your resume because I'm trying to put the picture together. Eventually, how long did I tell you a resume's lifespan is, right? 20 seconds maybe, right? Eventually, I'm looking at the stack and I've got more to get through and I'm going, man, I don't have time for this. I'm done, right? I'm done. That also coupled with, as a hiring manager, when I looked at a functional resume, I just said, what are you trying to hide from me? Why are you making me work so hard? I don't want to work this hard. I can't figure this out. I'm done. So a targeted resume, again, I know I'm kind of on a soapbox here, but Steve knows I'm passionate about this, but man, I just hate seeing those things because largely I know in many cases how it's going to be perceived and the amount of work it's going to make for the hire manager or somebody in HR to assess, hey, are you really what we're looking for? Right?
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, this is what you asked for, and I'm telling you I'm that, right?
Yeah, I'll just add, you're 100% right. The functional focuses on your self-assessment of your skill sets, right, and your experiences. Whereas the targeted, the reverse chronological targeted, really is the prove it to me, right? Show me that you have done these and explain to me that you have done these in very specific. And, we don't talk about interviewing in this particular show today, but, when you think about what is the most common question format out there these days, right? It's the situational based question. Tell me about a time when, right?
Sure.
Fill it in. And the targeted, is very focused in that direction. It's tell me about a time when you had to, do something or achieve something. And it's listed right there in your experiences. Whereas the functional, it doesn't come out that way. So I know the questions I'm going to ask on an interview process. The functional doesn't really speak to me in that regard. It doesn't tell me about a time when you had to do something. It tells me on your self-assessment of your skill sets and your experiences. And frankly, I'm the decision maker here. I want to make that decision.
Yeah, and it creates, I would just reinforce for everybody, there's some work. You've got to now, all right, where were you when you did this thing?
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was it? How current are you in doing this thing? Right? I mean, that's left for the reader to try to connect these dots and figure this out in many instances. And,
well, that brings me to
creates work.
That brings me to I think a good question to kind of wrap this conversation up on, as we're having this conversation on modern technology. And you've said obviously there's technology reading resumes and writing resume and all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the original online resume tools that at least people perceived it that way was LinkedIn for many years. And I think actually, that's my question for you. Where are retirees entering the retirement? Every day there's a new retiree entering this process. Okay, I got to get started. And they may or may not have been on LinkedIn this whole time. And I think probably in the typical transition process, they tell you to kind of treat your LinkedIn like a resume. And the way you guys just described the functional versus targeted, it's like, oh, that's what I've been trying to say about LinkedIn. I don't know the right answer, so I'm not arguing one way or the other, because if you have a functional resume, then you want to put things in there where a potential hiring manager is searching. And that's how you think you're supposed to network on LinkedIn. And maybe you get found amongst the many others that have similar kind of profiles. But you can have your resume to answer those questions, that kind of stuff anyways, versus more of a targeted profile, more of maybe a direct outreaching strategy. What's the proper answer on, at least today, 2023, on how you use LinkedIn as part of this resume process? You know what I'm saying? It's not obviously, exactly like a resume. And so maybe you shouldn't use it too much that way. Maybe you're wasting an opportunity. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. And Steve, I'd love to chime in if you got a thought on this, but a couple of things just kind of jump out to me. As a hiring manager, I can always tell you, once you were in the keep pile, once I was done looking at your resume, I wanted to go to your social media profile. I wanted to learn more about you, your brand. And we espouse, when you're doing a targeted resume, right? There's really, we get this a lot. They go, Mike, you're telling us my resume's got to be 2 pages and no more than 2 pages. Mike, I've been in the Navy for 29 years. There's no way I'm going to get all that stuff on 2 pages. And I'm like, well, you know what? You're 100% right. And the good news is I don't want you to get all that stuff, that you did over the last 29 years, right? I just want to capture your last, what do we say, Steve? Like 7
to 10 years,
somewhere in that window, right? Because think about it this way, Scott, if I'm having to reach back 27 years ago to bring some critical skill forward that you're asking me to be current in, right? Am I really, I may have done it and maybe it's worth a conversation, but if I'm doing that, pulling that deep for something that I did that somebody's looking for me to be, the current fit for that, I may not be as competitive or as current in that regard. And that's just, I have to assess it that way. But when I put a resume into the keep pile, I want to go to your LinkedIn profile, and what I want to see there is maybe LinkedIn is a great place, right? For I only put 8 years of reach back in my resume. I don't think LinkedIn is a bad place as a repository to capture all 29 years, right? I mean, if you wanted to say, I went to the Naval Academy here, and then I started flight school here, and these are the other milestones that led up to the crescendo of the 8-year reach back that aligns with my resume, right? I mean, I think that's an acceptable place to put that. The other thing too is you got to make sure that you've got alignment, right? I mean, you told me one story on a resume. If I go to your social media profile on LinkedIn and your work history looks completely not in alignment, that can be an other, right? You're going to create some questions for me there, but it's a great platform to reinforce and perhaps tell more about the alignment story and what you did, right? So it can be a powerful tool. It's a branding tool, right? It's a reinforcing the alignment and interesting statistics, right? We like sharing analytics with our members. As we go back and you start looking at the social media part of this, recruiting, managers, hire managers, talent acquisition managers, they're likely to spend probably 10 to 15 times longer on your social media profile than they are on your resume. Right. And so if you spend a little time, and we walk members through how to optimize their LinkedIn profile to make people to want to stay there longer, because ultimately it's alignment, it's blended effort, right? And it's more of what I already liked. I liked you enough to put you in the keep pile. Now I want to go to your social media profile. I want to see more of what I liked and learn a little bit more about you, if that makes sense. Right. So, it's kind of reinforcing, and what do I want to say? It's additive, right? I think to the resume effort. Steve, thoughts on that? What I miss in that? I mean,
no, you hit it right on the head, Mike. The resume is kind of it's literally black and white piece of paper, right? And when you go to your social media profile, LinkedIn, perhaps, it puts some color on there. It provides some context. I can see a picture. I start associating that person with the skills, and it just, we're visual people, we're visual creatures, right? I get a different impression of you, Scott, when I look at your LinkedIn picture, profile, from what I would if you just sent me a picture of what U.S. Vet Wealth was all about, right? I can see what you are as a person, and it just, I don't know, I talk about in the cohort, about creating hooks, like Velcro, little hook and pile. Like the more hooks you can create, and I consider a solid LinkedIn profile as an additional hook, right? I'm interested in your resume because you got some great skills, Now I look at your social media, you got a good presentable, professional photo there. You got some additional context on your jobs that you wouldn't put on a resume. But I know, where you went to, college and your high school, and, maybe some of your varsity athletics or some of the clubs you're in. Now I'm starting to resonate more with you as a person that I could maybe work alongside, right? And so I just think, like you said, it's an enhancement to the cold, 2-page PDF format, and I think they go hand in hand. A solid resume with a solid social media, it puts the odds more in your favor for a future phone call or a connection.
Hey, Mike, you mentioned the other day you found that feature where you can do a video on your LinkedIn profile. Now, have you heard of anybody using that feature yet, or success? It's maybe just a little bit of an elevator pitch, just in case someone comes in. Hey, you might as well see this person's human. It's a feature.
There's a lot of these new features that are out there, right? I mean, you can put that short little video there on your profile. We have members that approach us about, we've all seen the banner that you can put around. I think it says, one of the banners says, what is
open to work?
Open to work or something.
Yeah, is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, the way, I'm not sure it's good or bad, but we do have a thought on it, right? We look at it as a passive engagement, meaning you're throwing this, I'm open to work, and I'm going to sit back and wait for people to come to me. And that's absolutely contrary to the approach that we put out to our members, where we want them to drive what is their best fit. What are the options that they want to pursue that might be very meaningful for them. And then let's get busy and targeting the network and pursuing, that engagement, which is completely different from putting a banner up and saying open to work. And I'm just going to wait for somebody to come to me. Right. I mean, I guess, my preference would be obviously the proactive approach, but it's kind of like a niche win. I mean, has somebody ever put up open to work, and has somebody ever knocked on their door and said, hey, I want you to be the CEO of my company. I'm willing to pay you $1 gajillion a year. I mean, maybe. I think the chances of that happening are probably, pretty slim. But, it's a passive approach. I guess I would just say it that way. Steve, thoughts on that? I mean,
totally agree. I don't have I guess I don't get a favorable impression when I see the open to work. I don't have an unfavorable impression either. We kind of advise you probably don't need it if you're doing all the other techniques and things that we discuss. That is not going to move the needle at all, and it may attract people that you are going to spend time with that probably you don't need to spend time with. Focus your efforts. I don't think that really focuses your effort. But again, it's very personal.
And just to be clear too, Scott, I'm sure the listeners are on, and we're all familiar. You can go, if you have a well-written LinkedIn profile, there is a function on there at one click, and you could just say, write my resume from my LinkedIn profile, and the algorithm will crank out a resume for you. And I encourage you to play around with that and look at it. If I could foot stomp, on the podcast here, I would highly recommend that not being the product that you go forward with, right? But if you just wanted to look and just see what your profile looks, it can be helpful, I think, if you wanted to write a resume based on content on your LinkedIn profile and then take that to SkillSyncer. If you were targeting a position description, right, Steve? I mean, you could target that language and go back and upload it into your profile because that's all searchable, right? And if you wanted to kind of do that, I highly encourage it. The more we get into this, Scott, the more I think, on the social media side of this, and not to segue too far away from the discussion on resume, is that we prefer our members treat their LinkedIn profile to be a dynamic environment. In other words, it's just not set it up one way and walk away from it. Mm-hmm. Play around with it a little bit. If you're worldwide deployable, change your location, see what other searches you're going to get caught up in. If you try changing your content, try following a different company that you may be interested in and see if somebody else comes and looks at your profile, right? Try adjusting the modifiers on, behind your name, President, U.S. Vet Wealth / activist, podcast host, whatever, and see if that gets you caught up into a new search, and leave it there for 2 weeks and see what you get, right? And then go in and update this accordingly. It doesn't have to be just a build it and walk away from it. And, it's a tool, right? It's a tool. It's not the end all tool, but it's definitely an important part of the tool in building your brand and going forward, right?
Yeah.
And it's synergistic to your resume for sure.
Well, right. Because how much is a hiring manager, recruiter expecting to gather resumes via LinkedIn, or is that too much? I mean, or people like, hey, here's what, just emailing them out. Like, is that something to avoid? Or sometimes, hey, that's a way to get in front of people. Like, how is the resume treated on LinkedIn? What's the best way to do that?
I think technology is probably starting to scrape resumes that are online, Scott. I think there's some automated stuff. I don't think recruiters are actively out there doing it themselves. There's algorithms out there that'll scrape that information and narrow that pool down of what they're looking for. But yeah, I think that technology is out there. People do get hired on LinkedIn. In fact, they will, you'll see on their profile, hired by through LinkedIn. So
it does happen. Yep.
It does happen. So it's an important thing. Mike does a whole session on LinkedIn, in his cohort. We spend a lot of time talking about that. So it is very valuable. But it's just one part of the puzzle. It's a very important part, but it accompanies the resume. In my particular, feeling it's an enhancement to your skills and your background. It's not what's going to get you the job.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, guys. Wow, that was just a ton of tips. I think that actually,
we're a little passionate about it.
We didn't have enough content to go for an hour. Look at this. We went for an hour just talking about this stuff.
Yeah. We're just
No,
getting
no. I
started.
mean, that's the thing with a topic like this. There's always a new example. There's always a new lesson learned, or something changed. To keep up to date with what's needed these days. I mean, the fact that LinkedIn is not the resume replacement. Being clear about that is important. But at the same time, you probably can't not have LinkedIn. So just recognizing how are you going to make those two things work together, but for you, maybe there isn't a one size fits all approach. So I know that's how you guys approach it. And like you said, these are steps 5 and 6 on the process. You got to figure out what you want, what you're worth, and what you have going for you beforehand. So, appreciate your tips as always. And Steve, come back anytime, of course.
Yeah. Thanks for making the time, dude. It was awesome. I love the discussion. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks.
And, real quick announcement for next Tuesday. We're talking 1:30 to the Veterans Yoga Project, and Jen Gross went through Mike's cohort, your guys' cohort up in DC. I'm guessing you were there.
Yep, back in September. Yep.
And I saw she had left a comment saying how great that was, and I saw in her headline that she did Veterans Yoga Project, and that's kind of one of my things, mindfulness and breath work and yoga and stuff. And I thought, hey. What I know about some of these guys have been in for 30 years, they haven't had a chance to think about things like mindfulness. And it's a stressful time. There's a lot of stressful things going on. I'm very close with. You ever talk to John McCaskill? You know him by chance?
I know the name, right? I do, but
he does a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness with my friend Will Schneider
That's right.
on LinkedIn. So they post a lot of stuff. So I'd actually like to get them on here talking as well. But Veterans Yoga Project first, because next week is Gratitude Week. It's a big thing they have going on. So they were like, hey, this is perfect timing to come have a discussion. So thought that'd be a fun thing to chat about, see if, something extra for the military retirement toolbox.
That's excellent. Should be a good conversation. Look forward to it.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to announce got going on before we go?
Awesome. Thanks again, Steve, for making the time to join us.
Of course. Thanks for what you're doing, Scott. Thanks, Mike.
No, thank you guys. Appreciate it. This is fun.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
All right. Well, everybody, we'll see you next week, Tuesday at 1:30.